Year 7, Unit 2, Selection in Python, Lesson 1. In this session today, going to be looking at Python 3 and how to print things on screen. We're going to be learning about a data type known as strings and how to store and use variables that we've assigned. Go to Lesson 1 on Codio. Your Codio project should look a little bit like this. This on the right hand side is called your guide. It gives you the 4 stages you can do, and you can flick between your guide stages by clicking on the right here and back. And on the left we've got some examples in activity 1 where we're trying to get something working. If we press run code at the moment, you can see in the bottom left we can see the code in the top left is being run, but there's some problems with it. And it's telling us, it's saying invalid syntax at the moment because it's not happy with how this introductory piece of code is trying to get the words hello world to appear on screen. So we've got quite a few examples here. Each of these has got its own little problem. The only one actually that's correct is this one at the top. Print is in lowercase. This is called a subroutine or a function. This is a built-in function of Python called print, and what it does is it makes something appear on screen. What you can see inside these brackets is what it's going to try and print, and currently it's printing a data type known as a string, and this one is the string that contains the words hello world, a very typical starting point in Python 3. We've got some problems. All of these wouldn't be acceptable. Let's go to the one that's actually causing the problem. The first one that it's not happy about is line 3. So you can see that's line 3, it's indicating this line, and it's trying to tell us that it doesn't understand the syntax, which means the grammar. And the grammar is obviously incorrect because it's missing. You can see the differences here. So if you wanted to get it fixed, you have to put a speech mark there. Run it again. This one's a slightly different error. Missing parentheses in called print. Parentheses are the brackets. So you can see those spaces should be brackets. When you put an open bracket in Codio like I just did, you'll see that it closes the bracket straight away. If you wanted to do it if you want to do a shortcut, you can highlight the word hello world and put your open bracket at the start, and it'll put it at the end as well. Run it again. Again, we're getting an invalid syntax. This time on line 6. It's very common. Well, there is a problem with line 6, but actually, I think this one is whinging about something slightly different. It's not concerned about the fact that print isn't, well, it's in capital P yet. That's not what that's complaining about. It's actually complaining about the missing parentheses or bracket at the end of line 5, which is quite a hard one for new programs to understand when Python is giving you these error messages. So just beware of that. Actually, it can very often be referring, even though it's saying line 6, because line 5 hasn't actually been run properly. So we'll run it again. And finally, we get to the last one. We finally do get some hello worlds on screen. We get hello world, hello. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. And then obviously the last one fails. And finally, we're getting this last error message, which is saying print is not defined. There's no definition for it. What that implies is it doesn't know what print means. It doesn't know. It doesn't have any reference to that. And so it's quite picky. Obviously, that needs to be in lowercase. So we'll run that one. So there's the first 4 stages. We'll try and go a little bit faster now. Can you write some print statements without any syntax errors to begin a conversation with the computer? Practice using the IDE. That's this. Getting it to put the closing brackets and closing quotes. So you take a moment, stage 2, just try and write some different strings out. So it's print, open your bracket. I did that a little bit quick. Open your bracket and you can see it auto puts both. If I press the shift 2, that's the double quotation. You can use the other quotation on the @ symbol on a British keyboard and use single quotations. Both will work just fine, but I'll just use shift 2 because that's what we've been using. Hello, how are you today? What is your name? Something like that. Being very careful to make sure that if you start the open bracket, quotations, you also have to finish it. So we'll run that, and you can see your little conversation starts up on the board on the little bottom left, which is called the terminal. Stage 3. We finally get to start using the placeholders. So if I go back to my guide and go to... so we've done a lot of printing. We're going on to variables now, and this diagram kind of explains variables quite well, which I quite like. This idea that obviously a programmer wants to be able to use data later in the future. So at the moment, all we can do, well, back here in stage 2, is just get text to display on screen, but it's a very important skill that programmers need in order to store things. And we store them in placeholders, which kind of seem in a computer like boxes. That's the easiest way to visualize them. Placeholders that can store different things. In this case, the text hello, or the string hello, as you need to start using, is getting assigned, that's what that means, to place inside X. And we write that in Python if we want to do that, being careful that this Word, if ever you're copying code from Word, the quotations that Word puts in are actually different to the quotations that that Python uses. Believe it or not, there are many types of quotation. Anyway, so let's try that out. Well, before we try that, I'll just show you what we're going to demonstrate with that. At the moment, we're taking this string, world, and putting it into the variable y. And you can also copy variables. You can make copies of them. So in this context, someone put the string hello into the variable x, and you can then make a copy of that just by writing z equals x. So that there's a lot of tie over from algebra in maths, for example. These variables, even though they're single letters at the moment, like in maths, they don't need to have single letters, but we're going to keep them as single letters for the rest of this, just because it's similar to what you might do in maths. So we'll go back to this. We'll go back to stage 3, and you can see here we've got a slightly different. We've got a slightly different data here. That isn't. This is a string, and this one is known as a whole number, and the data type for that is an integer. So we've got this data type called a string and an integer. Notice the difference in color, and notice the missing speech marks. You only need to use integers when you want to start doing maths with your or any calculations with your numbers. If you're not doing any calculations with it, programmers always use strings. So for example, phone numbers never traditionally have maths or any calculations carried out on them. So phone numbers traditionally, a lot of beginner programmers think that phone numbers and so on should be stored as integers, but they really shouldn't. They actually start with 0, which is, if you try to make an integer start with 0, it won't be very happy. Anyway, so let's try it. Assign a variable z with a number value and assign a variable q with a string value. So quite easy. So we go z equals. The spaces aren't necessary, but it's good practice to put them in. So z equals a number value. So you can use any number you like, just as long as you don't put a decimal place in there, because we're not using floating point numbers yet. And assign a variable q with a string value. So q equals, I don't know, anything you like. Hello. Well, hello there. Something a little bit more interesting. Obviously, it won't do anything at the moment. I mean, if I run this, nothing happens. Well, that's because we haven't printed anything. We could print something. We can print hello. Hello. I mean, at the moment, all you're going to get is hello printing. But what we could do is start to actually print the variables we've just assigned. We could print z, run that, and you can see that z gets printed. Even though z is an integer, that doesn't matter. It's quite happy printing both. And you won't see the quotations when I print q either. You won't see this little quotation. So I'll run him as well. So you can see hello there runs. And finally, stage 4. Customize the story by changing the name of the hero and the villain. So here's your hero. You can change what's in there. Being careful not to delete, being careful not to do that, because that has a subtly different meaning. It means, please take the variable David with a capital D and assign that to the variable hero. Just like we demonstrated here, this 3-way concept of something being stored in X being placed in Z, which isn't really what we're trying to do in this context. I can put that in speech marks, and then it becomes a string, and then we can put the variable David inside the hero variable. So we'll run that. David is not defined. Why am I getting David is not defined? Hero is David, but I've already changed it. Let's see if that's going to happen again. There we go. It's doing it now. It was already a dark afternoon that winter when Jane stood outside the school waiting to steal sweets from smaller students as they left. David had heard blah, 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 and so on. Enjoy.